Hi, it's Frank once again. I want to talk about something today that's a little bit different than the chords and inversions that we've been working with lately. However, it does tie into it. Most of the stuff we've looked at, of course, has been diatonic to the key of C, all the major minor chords and the diminished chord too, for that matter. All of that culminated in the last video where I had a chord melody arrangement of the song Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I used all the chords available to us in terms of diatonic chords in the key of C in that, just to show you how we could go ahead and use inversions to move us around the neck. Since there's more than one key in music, of course, I want to go ahead and introduce an idea called transposition. This idea is going to allow us to move out of the key of C to continue using the same kind of triads and inversions that we've been working with up to this point, but just in other keys. So to transpose in music just really means to take a piece of music, whether it be just one or two measures long or an entire piece, and move it into another key by simply maintaining all the same intervals. However, we have different starting points. That is to say, if we're working in the key of C and we want to move to the key of G like we're going to practice today, what we have to be aware of is what's going on in the new key. In other words, what makes it different from the original key. In this case, C having no sharps or flats means the key we move into is going to have something. Since we're talking about going into the key of G, that something specifically is one sharp note. So to back up for just a second, in case you're unfamiliar with the major scale, once again, that's a collection of notes that's always built the same way. The same intervals between the notes are what give us specifically a major scale. So we've talked a little bit about this early on in my video series. The idea is that when we're working with a major scale, C major like we did, we had a starting point, a root. From there we moved up a certain amount of distance on the guitar, 2 frets, 1 step we say to get to D, the same distance to get to E, and then once we got to the E note, we had to move a half step to get to F, 1 fret. From there, we moved up another whole step to get to G, another whole step to get to A, 1 more whole step to get to B as in boy, before finally, if we want, ending with the octave, which is a half step away from the B as in boy note. That pattern, as it turns out, is exactly the pattern we'll apply to all other starting notes when we want to construct a major scale. We call that pattern, for shorthand purposes, a scale. That's it. In this case, specifically the major scale. And it always follows the same pattern of construction using those same intervals, those same distances between the notes. Whole step to half, and then whole step to whole step to whole step, and then again to complete the octave, another half step. So that means then, if we wanted to go ahead and start on the note G, which I'm going to locate for us as being on the 3rd fret of the 6th string, we could begin there and use the same pattern of construction. Remember, when we're working with these scales, we're always talking about using all 7 notes that are available to us in the in the musical alphabet. So it doesn't matter what note we start on, we always have to come back around to it as we go from the lowest to the highest note. And for our purposes, we're just going to think about scales as going from low to high for now. Different ways to practice them that don't limit you to just that. But again, for today, for our purposes, low to high. So once again, if we're starting now on G here, then we have to think about the next few notes of the alphabet just to get us going. If A, B, C, D, F, G is what we normally have available to us, then if we're starting on G, clearly we have to start back at the beginning to find the next note. That's going to be A, and that's going to be a step above that. When we get from A to the next note in the alphabet, it becomes a little bit easier, of course. We get to B, that's a whole step above that. So again, the pattern to start with was 2 whole steps, A to B, G to A, and then A to B, and then a half step. So that means the next movement has to be a half step away, and it turns out that note is C. Again, the musical alphabet, G, A, B, C. So in this case, that C is a half step away from the note B as in boy. From here, we're going to need 3 whole steps to get us to the octave. So that means from C, we have to go up 2 frets to D as in dog. That gives us our 5th. From there, we go up another whole step to get to E. Now, from E, if I were to go up a half step, 1 fret, I would land on F. That would keep all the notes natural. Keeping all the notes natural is relative for us to the key of C, the one we're trying to leave. But of course, we want to move into a new key, the key of G. So to do that, what we're going to have to do is take that F note, which in this case I'm playing as the 3rd fret of string 4, and move up a half step. That makes it an F sharp. By doing that, I've now got the final whole step distance that I need, E going up to F sharp. So just to recap those last 3 whole steps, that was C going to D as in dog, D as in dog going to E, going to F sharp, not F natural, meaning not the regular F, but F sharp. And then from there, I would use another half step if I wanted to reach the octave. And in a previous video, by the way, I shared that trick for octave finding on the 6th string. Just whatever note you're starting on, you go up 2 frets across 2 different strings. And there's the octave. So if you're starting on the 6th string, for the low note, the high note, the octave will be on the 4th string, 2 frets higher. And you can see that here. 3rd fret is the low note, 5th fret of the 4th string is the high note. So once again, that's how we build the G major scale. That's how we build any major scale specifically, but this one happens to be G because I started on that note. Now, another way that's really common for guitarists to work with this kind of thing is to think about what we call a scale shape. If you're familiar with first position chords like G or D or C, then chances are the idea of memorizing a shape isn't new to you. It means that a certain fingering always comes up when we're thinking about playing that chord, whatever the chord is. We can do something similar with scale shapes. Let me point that out real quick now. By the way, everything I'm talking about is available on a PDF, which once again is linked to in the description for this video. Specifically, it's a PDF that shows you different ways to finger the G major scale. Specifically, the pattern that I just showed you, as well as a couple of other ways. So again, a nice visual aid can sometimes help when we're talking about this kind of thing, because there's a lot of moving parts, so to speak. If we start on that C major scale again, I'm going to, this time, name the fingers that I'm using as I'm moving from one octave, the low octave, to the high octave. In this case, the fingering would be the 2nd to 4th, to 1st to 2nd, to 4th, to 1st to 3rd, to 4th. To be very clear and useful, 1 on your fretting hand is your index finger going across to your pinky, which is finger number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that pattern that I just used began on the 5th string and ended on the 3rd string. That gave me a C major scale because I followed the specific pattern of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half when I constructed it. Turns out if I start on the 6th string, in this case the note G on that 3rd fret, I can use the same pattern of construction, of course, but in addition to that I can use the same fingering, which means my G major scale can be thought of once again as the same collection of finger movement. 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. That's really convenient because that means anytime I'm starting a note with my 2nd finger, middle finger on the 5th or 6th string, if I memorize that specific scale shape, then what I've got is the ability to immediately recall how to start my C major scale, at least over 1 octave. Now, in the PDF I mentioned earlier, I covered 2 octaves. To be clear, that'll take you all the way from the 6th string to the 1st. But even just doing 1 octave means that I understand how to locate the notes that are unique to that key. And once again, when you move out of the key of C, you've got sharps and or flats. So that's where you have to really think in terms of, well, what's being altered? If I'm not in C, something is changing either in the direction of sharps or flats. From here, later videos, we'll get into the idea of the circle of fifths, cycle of fourths, as it's known one way or the other. But the main thing for now is to just think that when we moved from the key of C to G, we're going to go ahead and add a sharp. And that sharp note is F sharp. Once we understand that kind of movement, it will make it a lot easier to notice where the chords are in the new key, because they're going to follow similar patterns of construction to what we did in the old key. That is to say, the shapes are going to overlap, even though they might begin in different places of the guitar. The main thing we'll be aware of is now, instead of no sharps or flats, we have to deal with one sharp, in this case, F. But every other note remains natural. So again, moving from C to G is a pretty easy one on the guitar, and that's why we're going to look at that a little more closely over the next few videos. All right? Once again, you want to have a visual aid in front of you, check out that links to the PDF that has the G major scale in the description of this video. Take care.